Hello and welcome to our troubleshooting training video on the download tool. This is brought to you by the E3 team. Please note that this video is primarily focused on troubleshooting and not using the download tool. If you aren't already familiar with the download tool, just know that it's a way for users to download data from a server or upload data to a server within an Alteryx workflow using HTTP or FTP protocol. Now, you don't need to be an expert on HTTP and FTP protocols. You just need to know that they are both ways to communicate with an external server. No matter which protocol the tool is configured to use, the requests are sent out by curl and are easily traceable with Fiddler or Wireshark. In the demo in this video, we will focus on HTTP traffic, but the approach can be used for troubleshooting FTP traffic as well. Now, what is curl? Curl is an executable program that's open source that is used for sending data to and from a server. It can be called from the command line as shown in the screenshot here to the right. Now this is good to know, however, we have better tools for testing curl requests than just using the command line. Postman is the one that Alteryx support typically recommends using. This is a very useful tool for building HTTP requests. It's kind of similar to the way the download tool works. It's a wrapper for curl requests. Now, if you can't get the requests working in Postman, you can't expect it to work in Alteryx. So if it doesn't work in Postman, it's either formatted wrong or you're dealing with a network issue. Both of these issues are outside the scope of Alteryx support. So users must be able to successfully make the request outside of Alteryx somewhere, either in Postman or Command Prompt or some similar tool that uses curl, in order for troubleshooting to be within scope for Alteryx support. Now this gives us a pretty solid first troubleshooting step, that is get the request working in Postman or any other tool that uses curl to send requests. Users should do this on their end. Now once they have the request working, if they can't then get it working in Designer, that's when it becomes in scope for support. And at that point, what we would do is get a Fiddler trace of the working request outside of Designer and a Fiddler trace of the erroring request coming from within Designer. And figure out how to set the download tool so that those requests look the same, and then they should both work. And now we're going to do a quick demo to see what that looks like. So here we are in Postman. We can see here we are making a GET request to httpbin.org. This is just our test endpoint. Now the sections we will focus on here are headers and params. The other ones can become relevant, but these are the sort of the basics. We can select and deselect parameters, and you can see they're getting added to the query string up here. Similarly, we can select and deselect headers that we want to include in the request. A lot of times the headers are kind of the key in troubleshooting here, so you'll definitely want to pay attention to these. Now we'll go ahead and send the request, and Postman shows us the server's response here below. Now in most real use cases, there will be data here that the customer will use in their workflow. But this shows a successful connection either way. Now using the same endpoint, we have a workflow configured here using the download tool. So we're reaching out to httpbin.org. I did 2 rows here just to show you that each row is going to send the request once. So the download tool will iterate through each row. Now the URL has to be workflow data. Headers can be added here either from workflow data or manually as constant values. And we can add parameters here the same way or a few other ways. Now, you can play around with this in troubleshooting, of course, but the point is you can run the workflow and it sends the request and shows us the same response. If we just expand this, there we go. Okay, so now I had Fiddler open that whole time, so we can look at the requests actually as they were sent. So here what we'll do is we'll find the request to httpbin.org. This is the one sent by Alteryx Engine. The one sent by Postman would be before there somewhere. So we can just find that either by looking or by searching for HTTP bin. Now I've been testing for a little while, so there's a lot of examples of it, but we're going to find the most recent one, which would be all the way at the bottom. So yeah, here's the one sent by Postman. Now, I personally like to look at it in raw format. There's a lot of different formats that you can look at these requests depending on how they were sent. but raw shows you everything. So we see the params here appended on the end of the URL and all of the headers sent by Postman. Similarly, we see the same from Alteryx. However, you may notice that Alteryx is sending some headers automatically, accepting coding and accept, but Postman is sending a lot more. So one troubleshooting step would be to try and take these and add them into your download tool, like so. So we have the value and the name of this header right here. We'll just take it into Designer and we can put it in right there. And now this might not always be what's necessary for the customer, but we could at least add it here manually once as a test and see if it makes it work in the case where it's not already working. Now, since this request is already working, we don't actually need to do this. Just wanted to kind of show evidence of like how we would approach this. So yeah, we just ran it again, so we can look back at the fiddler trace, and there's a new request from Alteryx to HTTP bin, and this time it has that Postman token. And we could repeat this process with all the other headers to find which one is kind of the most important. Now, one thing I wanted to call out in Fiddler is that it doesn't actually trace FTP traffic as well, or automatically. So in order to actually inspect FTP traffic, you just have to go to Tools and then Options and go to the Connections tab and just select Capture FTP Requests. Otherwise, the approach can be more or less the same. You just want to make sure that a working FTP request exists from an outside Alteryx and all that. Now, one other thing to keep in mind is since the download tool is reaching out over the network, it can be impacted by networking issues. If you get the request to look exactly the same in Fiddler and it still isn't working in Designer for whatever reason, networking issues could be related. In this case, we would want to look at a Wireshark trace, not a Fiddler trace, as Wireshark shows more details about authentication and routing of traffic through the network. So I'm just going to do a quick reminder of how to grab a Wireshark trace just for your benefit. So here in Wireshark, the first thing to note is that you want to make sure that you're selecting the right connection in order to actually trace the traffic. Now, you can be lazy like me and just select all of them by shift clicking. Now you're making sure that you're tracing all traffic from the computer. Now to start a trace, you have to actually start a trace. You can't just open it like in Fiddler. You have to click this blue fin here. And now we're tracing all of the traffic on the machine. So what we can do now is go back to Designer or Postman if we wanted to, and run it, make sure the request is sent, go back to Wireshark, stop the trace, and then we can just save this as a pcap.ng file. Now, how to read this trace is a little out of scope for this video, but this could be relevant in a download tool case, so it's important to know how to at least grab this. And that's the end of our quick demo here. So finally, that leaves us with escalation resources, of course. So if you go through all these steps and you're still having trouble figuring out why you can't get a request, working in the download tool, that's of course totally fine. Please reach out to the E3 team. Now, please make sure you bring all these necessary resources so that we can be most efficient about this. What we want is the workflow file, or just something that shows the full configuration of the download tool. Similarly, we want something that shows the Postman configuration. Everything's on one screen in Postman, so a screenshot should do. We want 2 Fiddler traces and 2 Wireshark traces. One of each working outside Designer and one of each not working. When run from in Designer. This can really be done in one trace each. However, sometimes those files can get really big, which is why I separated them out into 2. It's really up to your preference. Now, proxy settings will also be important. So we'll want a screenshot of the Internet options, connections, LAN settings window. And then just information about the situation, mainly did the download tool work in the past? Yes, no. Was that on a previous version? Or was it working on this current version in the past? And then, of course, all the version details and any other relevant information, like with all escalations. Thank you.